Let's go to our next guest on the show this afternoon. I'm delighted to introduce Mr. Tobias Ellwood, Chair of the Defence Select Committee and Tory MP for Bournemouth East. Mr. Ellwood, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Great to see you.
Thank you very much. It's very good of you. My family actually come from Bournemouth, Talbot Woods, you may know, one district of Bournemouth, and I'll be down there for Christmas. So it's great to be speaking to you. Now, Mr. Ellwood, you have made your position clear on the cuts that the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mr. Rishi Sunak, is intending to try and introduce to the foreign aid budget, taking it down from 0.7% of GDP to 0.5%. What is your response to that, please?
Well, from where I sit as chair of the Defence Select Committee, the world is actually getting more dangerous. It's getting more unsettled. Threats are diversifying. The biggest threat we're still in denial about, and that's the geopolitical threat that's coming from China. Mm-hmm. So when we retreat from our projects across the world, that vacuum is filled by either extremism, because poor governance leads to that, or indeed by the Chinese. And once they get their tentacles into these countries, it's very difficult because of their One Belt, One Road programs. Yes. These countries get indebted. They get lured into the high-tech programs that China offers, but with all the problems that we've had over Huawei. Yep. And then, of course, the militarization comes from us that. This isn't necessarily understood so much from the British perspective, but the other aspect of it is simply the reputational hit that we will receive, because our stance in the world is perceived by our hard power and our soft power, our ability to provide answers to some of the difficult solutions around the world. I'll be the first to say, though, that there's been some really bad examples of where this money has gone. Yes. If I was in charge, if our military is involved, let's say in the Caribbean, helping after a hurricane, absolutely that should count. If we're helping in Afghanistan with stabilization, humanitarian or peacekeeping projects, that should count. And at the moment it doesn't, because these rules were made after the Second World War and they're well out of date. Yeah, OK. Now, I agree with an awful lot of what you said. And, of course, you have a distinguished military record, so you'll be very well aware of the soft power that Britain has around the world with its generosity to help other nations. I understand all of that, OK? But what I don't understand is why so little fine detail is put into the money we give away around the world. Why are we giving £2 million to China over the last 2 years? Why are we giving money to India? Why do we give money to the Congo, which, according to the United Nations, is the richest country in the world with mineral deposits of £24 trillion? I mean, we've got it all wrong, haven't we? I want to help people who are in need of help, but I don't want to be throwing money at not just the Chinese and the Indian, but what I think you might describe as extractive institutions, i.e. countries where they don't have the rule of law, where they're not democratic, and actually it's their leaders who benefit and not their people. So let's take this one at a time. Sure. China, I 100% agree with you. That should be stopped straight away. And this was put to the Foreign Secretary last week, and he just dodged the reply. It's out of order. We should not be giving money to a country that abuses its own citizens in its own countries and takes advantage of its relationships across the world. India, I'm with you on that one as well. Anybody with a space program should not be receiving our aid. Right. Congo is very different because they are resource rich, but they are very vulnerable. That's where extremism can flourish because there's poor governance and there's poor security. That's exactly the type of place that China then moves in. Yes. So us helping in Congo, where I would say we fail, where France and the United States does well, is when they do aid projects, they have their trade team following on right after to say, right, we've helped you out with this project. Now can we move it up a notch and start trading with you? We don't do that, and we should do a bit more of it. Yeah, okay, I understand all that. I think that foreign aid, the present situation of the foreign aid, I believe it to have been a vanity project from David Cameron, the Prime Minister, who not only decided it was going to be 0.7% of GDP, which I think meant an increase of 650 million in aid benefits last year, but Mr. Cameron decided to
try and enshrine it in law to hold the responsibility to future governments, which we've now got to get out of. Shouldn't it have been a much more versatile and movable feast, depending on the situation in this country and the situation in other countries around the world?
Well, it is a strong argument. Absolutely. Everybody says, listen, things are tough here.
Yeah.
The trouble is what happens abroad when things go wrong there have a habit of creeping up to us here. What's going on in Dover at the moment with some of those dinghies coming across, that's not a problem for Dover and France. That's a problem in Libya. I guess you turned up in Libya and said, we got rid of Gaddafi, and then we abandoned Libya.
Yeah, we did.
We should have hung in there and used that aid budget to support better governance, better security. And actually, it's one of the richest countries. Speak of Congo, Libya, we had BP, Shell was based there. It's oil rich.
Yes.
But nothing will flow when, of course, there's a war.
No.
And so many, 6 or 7 other nations around the world, including Russia, have tucked themselves in there. And that's why the problems are caused. Yeah. So we've got to bear in mind, you ignore what happens abroad at your peril.
Yes. Okay, I understand that. Just on the China situation, by the way, aren't they already infiltrating almost every country in Africa anyway? Haven't we lost that battle, Tobias? Isn't it now too late to try and stop China?
We are losing that battle, and we need a counterweight. Yeah. So just as we decided to not include Huawei, if you remember that debate here, part of because it was threatening our critical national infrastructure, China is gifting Huawei and 5G to other countries so they'll be able to control their data. Yes. What the West needs to do is to have a counterweight. You might recall or be aware of, the Sputnik moment back in 1957 when finally America looked up and they were told that there was a Russian satellite going across, watching everything they do. That was the moment they woke up and recognized that the Soviet Union was a threat to them. Yes. And that led to the Apollo program, winning the space race and getting ahead. Yeah. We need the same Sputnik moment with China. Yeah. And the penny hasn't dropped yet.
Yeah, no, I totally support all of that. You're absolutely right. Can I suggest that we pursue a principle of don't give a man a fish, teach him how to fish, i.e., I mentioned just a minute ago, the extractive institutions where we don't know where the aid goes once it's gone to that country. Can we not do it at a greater local level within those countries and teach people how to look after themselves, how to grow crops, how to find clean water without it having to go through the people who deal with the money, and we never know if it gets there? I mean, what I'm saying is here that if you look at the figures, the world is actually getting less poor, because of the development of nations. We need to try and speed up that, lack of poverty and erase poverty, but we need to do it at a much more grassroots level, don't we?
No, I completely agree with you. And it needs to be more transparent. Put me in charge, and I'll have you as one of my advisors.
That'd be
I'm
great.
sure we could then clear it up, and we can actually make the world a better place. Yeah. We could also increase our own British prosperity. Yes. And that's what this should be all about. Because well-targeted aid more than pays for itself. Yes. It educates, it creates skills, it creates markets, it increases security, better governance. That means less migration and then more trade opportunities with us. Yes. And of course, we fend off the growth of China creeping ever across in the international sphere. Yeah, no,
I totally agree. I totally agree. Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ellwood, for all that. Before you go, can I just ask you, please, because of course you're MP, your constituency's Bournemouth East, what do you think of the new restrictions which are being imposed upon, huge swathes of the country from Wednesday this week, including the town you represent?
Yeah, well, we went into this lockdown with pretty low figures. We come out with it even lower figures. So we're absolutely baffled how we've ended up in tier 2 rather than tier 1. Yeah, I really would like to see a much more focused approach to this using up-to-date data. The data they used for all this allocation was 2 weeks old, and that doesn't help. The Nightingales also, do you remember that project?
Yes, I do.
7 of them across the country, they're empty. I spoke to the Defence Secretary last week. There are 2,000 military personnel, trained medics, ready to make sure that we could utilise our Nightingales, alleviating the pressure off our local hospitals, because that's the criteria. Yeah. Bournemouth Hospital is up against it a bit. Yes. But get the Nightingales working, and we can move back to tier one.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Well, look, Mr. Ellwood, thank you very much indeed for your time. I know how busy you must be at the moment. Our lawmakers are going to have to face, I think, a barrage of criticism. I'm sure your constituents aren't happy, and you're going to be pretty busy over the next few days. So thank you very much indeed for spending time to talk to me here on Talk Radio. OK, folks, that's Tobias Ellwood, Chair of the Defence Select Committee and Tory MP for Bournemouth East. And when Mr. Ellwood speaks about foreign aid, he knows what he's talking about. He's got a distinguished service record in the army, spent a lot of time in Northern Ireland, as I did. I think he was with the Royal Green Jackets, which is a very distinguished part of the British military. So when you hear him talking about the pros and cons of the overseas aid, you've got to listen. I personally support the idea of bringing overseas aid back from 0.7% of GDP to 0.5%, because I think we're in danger of being taken for mugs by people around the world. Also, and I maybe should have put this to Mr. Ellwood, but he will have known it anyway, it still means that we are giving more as a percentage of our GDP to overseas aid than any other European country, except, somebody tried to pull me up on this the other day, maybe Germany, who are reviewing their percentage, but we give twice as much as a percentage than the United States do. Just think of the United States, the enormity of their economy. It runs into trillions, not billions, OK? And even the United States don't give as big a percentage as we do of the GDP to help people overseas. OK, folks, what a brilliant show we've had so far. And that's all down to the fact that you're listening and you're getting involved and you're calling me. I want more of you to call me. 0344 499 1000, OK? Because I want you to let me know how we're going to face up to the travails which face us between now and Christmas.